Hello and welcome to the March 2025 Q&A on moving to France. My name is Allison Grant Lounes. I am the owner of the relocation agency Your Transformation. We help people get the right visa, do all of the French admin for following their dream of living in France. I am the author of the book Foolproof French Visas, the latest edition of which I do not have in front of me. It's the 2024-2025 edition. That's the fifth edition that we published. It covers everything that you need to know about applying for a visa to relocate to France, which visa type is a good fit for you, how to become eligible for it, how to put together an application, and all the documents that you're going to need for each of about 30 different visa types. I'm also the admin of the Americans in France Facebook group, where we have about 22,000 members, and I'm in there every day answering questions about relocating successfully and making sure that you get good information. Because unfortunately, in a lot of places around the internet, it's really easy to ask a lot of questions in a lot of different places and get a lot of wrong, outdated, slightly misinformed answers. The information on applying for visas, on moving to France, on doing French admin has changes regularly. I've been doing this type of work for about 10 years, and I can tell you that pretty much nothing is the same as it was a year ago, much less 5 years ago. So I really do want to encourage you as you are reading different things and evaluating, how you're going to apply for your visa and relocate. Make sure that you are getting reliable, up-to-date information from somebody who is doing this every day and not somebody who applied once for their own visa 2.5 years ago and is now answering your question. So thank you for joining me today. I have a lot of your questions that were submitted in advance, and we're going to try to get through them all. I think we'll be able to do that. So without further ado, I'm going to go over to my questions. I'm going to do the ones that have been pre-submitted first. I've reorganized them a little bit to try to group some similar questions together. If we have time at the end, I will go to the questions that are posted in the chat or the Q&A box, but the ones that I have pre-submitted may take up the full hour, so we will see. And all right, Stella, with a French national tax partner, can I do things like open a bank account if I am not residing in France permanently? Probably not unless you own property. You need to have some kind of economic tie to France. If you're just taxed with somebody and you're not residing in France, you're probably not filing joint taxes with them. You probably don't have a good reason to open a French bank account. And I think you might find it difficult to get an account. So it's probably going to be tricky. While waiting for the residency card, do I need to remain in France if my tax partner permanently resides in France and has an address where I can receive mail? You don't say what visa type you are applying for, but presumably if you are only getting taxed, you're only going to be able to apply for a visitor visa to start. If you are applying for a visitor visa and moving to France, then you don't necessarily have to stay. You can travel back and forth during the year of your visa. You're not a prisoner of France, but you do need to be spending the majority of your time in France. There will be things like the medical visit to do. There'll be a lot of French admin to do. And there's a lot of things that need to happen in that first year to get everything set up. I mean, having the address already is a big win. It will make things a lot easier for you. You'll need to get some bills in your name to show that you're actually residing with your partner. But if you want to switch to a vie privée familiale visa, you need to be residing with your partner and taxed for more than 12 months. And then you can switch to a vie privée familiale that will give you more right to work, for example. If you're just recently taxed and not yet living together, you're only going to be entitled to a visitor visa or to be sponsored by your partner for a visitor visa because tax does not give the same rights as marriage. Noel, what is the difference between tax and a marriage visa? I jumped the gun a little bit on that question. So if you are already married and your marriage is registered with the French consulate, then you can apply directly for a vie privée familiale visa, which is a 12-month visa. You arrive in France, you'll do the medical visit, you'll do the 4 OP integration visits, and you'll sign the Republican integration contract and take a language test and potentially get assigned a certain number of language hours. And the goal is to get you integrated into France and learning French relatively quickly. You will have the right to work in France from the start. If you are packed, then that does not give you the same rights as being married. Typically, you're going to apply for a visitor visa or a different type of visa, and you'll have to be paxed and living together for 12 months before you can switch to that private and family life visa type. Both of those are covered in foolproof French visas. And I'm going to give you the link to foolproof French visas in the chat. How far in advance do you have to apply for this visa before moving? So a visitor visa is fairly straightforward because there's not a lot of waiting for documentation. You don't have to even be packed to get a visitor visa. So having the packed document is just a bonus. If you are applying for a marriage visa and you got married in the US or you got married outside of France, then you're going to need to first register your marriage with the French consulate in the jurisdiction where you got married. So the French person needs to contact the French consulate for that jurisdiction. For example, anywhere in New England would be Boston, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, et cetera, would be New York, and so on and so forth. And you will have to submit a certain number of documents to the French consulate to register the marriage with the French authorities. That means that the consulate is going to want a copy of both of your birth certificates. They're going to want a copy of your marriage certificate, certain other documents, proof of where you reside, proof that you are legally allowed to marry, you're not already married, which is called a certificat de coutume. And all of that documentation will go to the French consulate. Then the French consulate will forward that all. They'll authenticate the documents. They'll forward it all to the Service d'État Civil in Nantes, which is where all Français de l'étranger have to do their administrative documents. Once the marriage is registered with the Service d'État Civil in Nantes, that will take about 6 to 8 weeks. They will send back a French version of your marriage certificate called a transcription de l'acte de mariage and a livret de famille. And those two documents are what you need to apply for your French visa when you are married. So you have to add a good 2 to 3 months between marriage and applying for your vie privée familiale visa. If you get married in France, you're going to get the documents relatively quickly because you'll be able to get them from the mairie where you are married. But you still should travel back to the US or back to your home country to apply for your visa there rather than trying to stay in France. And it is technically possible to stay and apply. It is a total nightmare. And for one thing, they're going to ask you for 6 months of proof of common residence, which means that you're not going to have paperwork for at least 9 to 12 months. And you're not going to be able to work or do anything or travel during that time. You're not going to be able to get on the French healthcare system. So travel back to your home country, apply for the marriage visa in your home country. Melanie, I plan to apply for the Profession Libérale visa. My business plan includes operating 2 gîtes and hosting retreats. I've seen you tell people that they need letters of support from French clients. So I just want to provide such letters on an accommodation business. I have letters from people wanting to host retreats on my property, but they aren't French residents. So that's fine because no matter what, the people are coming to France to have the service provided in France. I will say if you're doing something with gîtes, one, you want to make sure you have the purchase, the final acte de vente for the apartment. You do not want to apply with just the compromis. If the person before you has been operating the gîtes as a business, ideally try to ask them for their revenue, proof of how much income they've been making. If they're able to take future bookings, like we've had BD clients who have purchased a property, the previous owners have continued taking bookings, and then the new owners go to their visa appointment and they already have like half the season booked up for that gîte because it already has a good reputation and they already have projected income. Carrie, if I meet France's minimum wage income requirement with passive income, but I want to continue working to stay busy, meet people, form a life there, do I need to earn the minimum wage from the business as well? Yes. If you have a self-employment visa or a business visa, they are specifically evaluating your visa renewal based on the income that you earn from the business. They don't care that I see this all the time. There was a question in one of the newsletters I read for one of the other relocation consultants, and it was about somebody who had applied for a self-employment visa, barely made any money, and then was surprised when her visa didn't get renewed because she had retirement income. They are not looking at your retirement income or your passive income when you are on a self-employment or a business visa. They are specifically looking to see, are you making money from your business? Are you following your business plan, etc. I'm an interior designer who would love to set up shop and do some design work, but it would be more for social and creative reasons than financial. That being said, they're looking for 1,800 euros per month. So if you're charging US prices, especially if you're working with US clients, that could be one project, or it could be a couple of hours of consultation. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to be working 30 to 35 hours a week doing all of these various projects just to make that amount of money. How closely do you need to execute your business plan, assuming it's approved to buy, create an interior design business, but find more success in doing guided tours and analysis of renowned properties instead with that work? I'd like to set up some sort of business, but not sure what angle would have the most traction. So you have to be a little bit careful because first of all, you're not able to incorporate all of those activities into your business plan without making it look like you don't know what you're doing. So you want to pick one thing in your business plan. Interior design is going to be an artisanal business. Something like tour guiding is subject to a lot of regulation. So you're going to have to make sure that the way you're doing tour guiding is compliant with various French obligations and French regulations. You can't just go off and start doing guided tours on the streets or in the monuments or things like that. You have to have a license to do it. So you want to make sure that what you're proposing and what you're actually doing, you're authorized to do it. Carla, for a remote worker not working with French companies, would you suggest the long-stay visitor visa? Never. No. Or the profits only Baja route? It depends on how many clients you're working for, what level of income you're going to have. In some cases, it's most advantageous to set up a business. In some cases, it's most advantageous to go with profits only Baja. You should never have a visitor visa for working remotely. It doesn't matter where your clients are. It matters that you will be a French tax resident by residing in France and doing the work from France. So yeah, I would want to have a conversation about your type of business, what expenses there are, what level of income you're expecting, whether or not you'll need particular types of insurance, that sort of thing before determining what is the best self-employment route. Another option, if you have a foreign employer and you're really only going to be working for them, you can do something called the portage salarial, where the portage is setting you up as a salaried employee. They're paying social charges to France, to URSSAF on your behalf. They're calculating your vacation time because, yes, the company has to follow French rules with regard to paid time off, overtime, paid vacation time, etc., which a lot of companies are not super excited to do, and things like that. So the foreign company would pay the portage company would do all of the admin and pay all of your social charges, but it can be quite expensive. This would allow you, however, to self-sponsor for like a passport talent carte bleue européenne if your salary is going to be more than 54,000 euros brut. In reality, that means that your company probably has to be built about $80,000 to $85,000 in order for that to be a viable option and to pay you that salary. I currently live in the UK on a work visa as a US citizen, and I'm planning on applying from the UK. Do you know how long it takes? And if I'm not allowed to travel while the application is in progress, I have some travel to visit family planned. So the consulate will take your passport while the application is processing. So you are not going to be able to travel during the couple of weeks that they have your visa type. Processing time is really going to depend on what time of year you're applying, because especially during the summer and especially in the UK, there are a lot of second homeowners that are applying for 6-month visas and things like that so they can spend the summer at their vacation home. It's going to be probably I would say probably 2 to 3 weeks. It takes a little longer in the UK than it does in many of the US locations. But if you're a US citizen, you can apply in a country where you reside or where you are a citizen. So if you're traveling to visit family in the summer, it may make more sense to apply from the US while you're on your trip. And then you don't necessarily have to plan your vacation around it. Katie, do you have to have French clients before moving to France, or can you obtain French clients once you are in France? If it is prior to obtaining the visa, do you have recommendations on how Americans can obtain French clients from the US? For the Provincial Libéral visa, they have really been insisting on having French clients, or, in the case of Melanie and her Jeets above, having clients who will come to have a particular service on French soil. That's one of the things that we brainstorm with our clients once they understand what somebody's business is and what types of service they're looking to provide. That's one of the things that I brainstorm with people is where do those people hang out? How can I get in touch with them? How can I leverage connections that I have with French people that I already know, with people that I know from the internet, etc. So it really depends on the type of business and the circumstances and the type of service that you're going to be providing. Noel, how difficult would it be for me to leave France with my child if I moved there to live with my French boyfriend and we have a child together but later break up? It would be pretty much impossible, so don't do that. You need to be really careful. Men, listen up. You need to be really careful about French custody law. Well, about custody laws in any country, but it can be common for women to move to a country with their partner, boyfriend, etc. When you move to a country for a partner, your visa is dependent on them. Your ability to work is dependent on them. It is not a crime, and I have a friend who runs the organization Women for Women France, which is about helping to support foreign women navigating the French legal system. Your Transformation makes a donation from our proceeds every year. Last year, we donated €3,000 to this organization for development of their legal resources. It is not administrative abuse, that she calls it, is not a crime, meaning your visa is totally reliant and dependent on your partner providing certain documents to renew it and for you to maintain your legal rights of residency in France. It is not a crime for your partner to withhold those documents. There are many women that can end up in situations like that where they are being abused and their partner is withholding financial resources, withholding the ability to get the documents required to renew their carte séjour, preventing them from going to administrative appointment. In many cases, the prefecture wants the French partner to come to the appointment with the non-French spouse. It doesn't matter how much you may trust your partner now, but there is plenty of possibility for abuse, and even abuse that is not illegal under French law at the moment. So be really careful. If you have a child with a French person, you're staying in France until that child is 8. Very likely. Melanie, I was reading through the book about the independent work visa types. I will be applying for a profit libéral visa. I will bring in my 2 children with me, 13 and 15 years old. Do I understand correctly that I need to apply for visitor visas for the kids? Yes. And to my point above, you will need to have an authorization from their other parent to make sure that you are not kidnapping them internationally by moving them to France. So that can take a bunch of different forms depending on the situation. We have clients who are single moms by choice who use the sperm bank and they just have paperwork from the sperm bank saying that their child does not have a second parent. That's totally fine. We have clients where the second parent is deceased. We have clients where there's adoption paperwork. I'd had one client who was divorced and who took her former spouse to court. The father wasn't really involved, but she still had to go back in front of a judge and get a court order to say that she could move her child to France. So you do need to have some type of documentation allowing you to move the child. I want to point out too, there was a question later on that from Marla. My son won't be enrolled in high school yet as we have to get there first to select a school. How best to explain represent the situation to obtain visa approval. So for children ages 3 to 16, they are required to be enrolled in school, and you need that school pre-enrollment document before you apply for the visa. It is a required document. Now, in some cases, they won't finalize the school enrollment, in which case you just have some information that you've exchanged with the mairie in the town where you're going to be located, or in this case, it's college and high school students, so you'd be exchanging with the département about testing for your child upon arrival and enrolling them in school once you get here. In most cases, that's going to be totally fine. If it's a private school, then you can pre-enroll the child in private school before you arrive. If it's a public school, it's a little bit harder to finalize the enrollment. Plus, you might be in a temporary address when you first arrive and need to find long-term housing after you get to France. So in that case, you might end up in a different school or a different neighborhood than you originally planned. That's totally fine. But you do need to have that school enrollment document before you apply for your visa. Peter, when submitting the accommodation portion of the French visa application, is it acceptable to provide an attestation de vente as proof of accommodation for the visa appointment? Since I'm not sure we'll have the deed. Yeah, so if you have purchased a house and the sale have gone through and you have the acte de vente and the keys, then you can just use the acte de vente. I would say typically you also want to have a recent utility bill in your name. So if you can get all of the electricity moved over, you should do that pretty quickly after you purchase after the sale goes through anyway. On the visa application for accommodation phone number, if you're using an Airbnb, we always just put the client, when we're doing this for our clients, we always put the client's email and phone number if it's an Airbnb, and we put the copy of the reservation. Mindy, if we sign up with your service, do you offer a list of trusted contacts for various things we may need? Tax professional, estate planner, property finder, etc. Yes. And we even do that for people who are not our clients on the condition that it's close enough to when you're actually going to need them. Because when you're working with us, we refer you to people as things come up. When you're 6 to 8 weeks from arriving in France, we'll introduce you to the person who does, apartment searches. When a tax season or if tax season is coming up, we'll introduce you to the tax professionals, etc., because that's the time that you're going to need them. When we've been referring people who come to the Q&A, people who are not our clients, etc., we're happy to refer you on to the professionals that we work with. But what is very strange is when people request all of the introductions, we make the introductions, which take lately a lot of work. And then people either don't respond or they're confused about why they're getting emails, or it turns out that they don't need them for 17 months. So I'm happy to make some introductions when the time is right, when you're actually ready to get in contact with people. And so when it's our clients, we do that. We know when you need to discuss certain topics with different professionals. But okay, Bonnie, does the letter stating why I want to live in France and the statement that I will not be taking a paying job in France need to be handwritten or typed fine? Do they need to be notarized? So there's actually a form that we use that's a standard French form. So you just fill in your personal details. It doesn't matter if you type them in or write them in. We just type them in for all of our clients, and then it doesn't have to be notarized. You just sign at the bottom. It doesn't matter. Like everybody asked me, does it matter? Do I have to sign it in front of them? Should I do it in advance? It doesn't matter. It takes 2 seconds to sign it. Who cares when you do it? Are local, state, and federal background checks still required? They've never required 3 background checks. When you're applying for a visa type or for you're setting up a business, if you're doing like passport talent entrepreneur and setting up a French company, you need a background check. It doesn't have to be a federal background check. A lot of our clients just use one of the online ones. In the UK, however, it does have to be an official government background check, which can take a little bit of time. Otherwise, if you're going to a French visa appointment, you literally just scan your fingerprints there and they run your fingerprints. They make sure you're not wanted by the FBI, and that's it. Angelica, I'm still trying to figure out the cell phone situation. My phone is paid off, expensive monthly plan with Verizon. How do I set up usage upon arrival so I can contact who I need to in France straight away? International plans through Verizon are very expensive. Okay, so my recommendation is to make sure before you leave that you unlock your phone. If your phone is paid off, Verizon should unlock it. When you arrive in France, you can go directly to either Orange or SFF, and you can get a temporary phone number with one of those pay-as-you-go cards and all of that. When you have that phone or that phone number for 3 months, then you can convert it into a monthly plan. And at that point, after the 3 months, you should have your long-term address, your bank account, all of those things, and you'll have everything that you need to set up a plan. You want to make sure that you're not changing your phone number, because when you validate your visa, you put in your phone number, and that phone number then becomes attached to your NF account, the Administration Numérique des Étrangers. When you go to renew your visa and your carte de séjour is ready at the signature, you're going to be receiving text messages to that phone number. So if you change your phone number in the meantime, you're going to potentially have difficulty getting notifications. So make sure that you don't change your phone number, or if you do, that you update all of your accounts and everything. And we actually had the case, I had to use my phone number for one of our clients because she didn't have a phone number. So that was fine. But then in the middle of her application, she got a phone number, but I couldn't go in and update it until I got the text that her card was ready. I won't be able to update it until she goes to pick up her card to the phone number that she now has. Free might have a better deal, Trevor, but you can't just walk into a store and get a pay-as-you-go free card, to my knowledge. If you're just showing up in France with a paid-off phone and you don't have anything to get a contract yet, I don't know that you can do free. Okay, David and Sonia, I read in your excellent guide to a visa to live in France presupposes you will be in France for more than 183 days, and you cannot renew the visa without actually living in France for most of the time. What would be the consequences of being outside of France in the U.S. so much that a visa holder's actual time in France falls short of that 183-day minimum? If you're not residing in France, you should not have a French carte de séjour. You're committing fraud. You should not be on the French healthcare system. You should not exchange your driver's license for a French license. Don't lie to the French government, guys. The holder of a non-work visa such as a VLFTF. The LFTF is about a dozen different visa types, and many of them allow you to work. It's not true to say that a VLFTF is a non-work visa. I'm going to assume you mean visitor visa, which is a long-stay visa that does not enable you to work. A visitor visa does not enable you to work at all, regardless of the client employer's location. Would it be problematic during renewal time to do some compensated contract work while in the United States in between periods spent in France? You can leave France to work outside of France. That is not a problem. The problem is when you are residing in France and your butt is in France and you are doing the work from France and the company and you have a company and the decisions are being made from France. All of that is working in France, and France has the right to tax your income first. If you are physically leaving France to go work in the US, even while you have a valid visa, that is a much more legitimate claim to working remotely because you're not physically working in France while in France. Can you explain what is needed for the language of France from the USA? I don't know what that means. What websites to look at, where to take a test, what paperwork is needed for a long stay visa. Okay, so there's no language information to provide while you're applying for your visa. You can take French classes anywhere, and then I do suggest taking a French test not too long after arriving in France. For some visa types, it will be required to do it, but not all of them will give you access to the OP language classes, in which case you'll have to take French classes on your own and pass the test to get a 10-year card. They're going to be a lot stricter on language requirements for multi-year cards and 10-year cards a little bit down the road. And at the moment, things are still a little bit unclear about exactly how that's going to work. Lisa, how many months of accommodation do I have to book for my 6 to 12 month visitor visa? We would like to be flexible. We always recommend just 4 to 6 weeks in an Airbnb to start. Assuming that you have enough cash in the bank, it doesn't really matter. If you're not planning on staying more than 12 months, you're going to get a temporary visa that is not going to be renewable, in which case you don't have any obligation to go to OP or anything like that. You're not going to be able to renew. You have to leave at the end of your visa. It's only if you get a 12-month renewable visa that you can extend it within France. If you're getting a renewable visa, then that comes with a lot of administrative obligations. Like you're going to need to find housing quickly and have a long-term address where you can get mail. You're going to need to exchange your driver's license within the first year, or you're not going to be able to drive. You're going to need to get on the French healthcare system, et cetera, et cetera. You need to be really clear from the outset. Am I getting a visitor visa to take an extended vacation in France that is not renewable? Or am I getting a renewable 12-month visa that I want to extend in France if I feel like staying? And then in that case, I need to plan as though I'm going to stay long-term. I'm not here to fact check people's lawyers. So if you have a lawyer, you should refer to them for your question. But a question that comes through that says, my lawyer said, blah, 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 is it true? Go talk to your lawyer about it. So that's a question I'm going to skip. If we successfully renew our long-stay visitor visa for 5 years, pay our taxes, and do everything right, are we then eligible to apply for a 10-year residency card in France? If yes, will the 10-year resident card allow us to work? Probably not, and probably not. A visitor visa is not something that leads to long-term residence. There are some anecdotal cases of people getting a 10-year card if they have significant income and resources outside of the US, and they've been filing their taxes for 5 years, they've taken the language test. There are some cases where people have gotten a 10-year card. Typically, it's more like the 7th, 8th, 9th renewal rather than the 5th. I won't say it's unheard of, but that's not necessarily granting you the right to work. The difference is if you have 5 years of income statements showing that you resources well above French minimum wage, then giving you a 10-year card does not open you up to any particular resources or benefits from residing in France. For example, if they're reasonably confident that you're going to have $2,000 a month in Social Security for the rest of your life, and you've been recording that on your French income tax declaration for the entirety of your stay in France, you're never going to be eligible for something like RSA, which is minimum resources. It's the sort of universal basic income for very low income French people. So what they're not going to do is give somebody who is working age, who just hangs out in France for 5 years, but without any particular resources, They're not just going to automatically grant that person the right to work after 5 years. That's not how it works. Marcia, how in-depth is the medical evaluation? It's really just to orient you to the French system. It's basically like going to the doctors for a physical. I think now they prick your finger. They didn't do that when I went. In most cases, Americans are now exempt from the chest x-ray. It used to be that you had to get a chest x-ray on site for tuberculosis, but now they're not even doing that for Americans. And in many cases, they're basing it on where you're coming from. That's really it. I mean, they ask about vaccinations, they check your eyes, they check your weight. If you're American, they probably tell you you're overweight, but it's not to eliminate you, and it's more so orient people who have not had a lifetime of preventative care into the French system. Marla, I plan to arrive in late July or so. Can I apply for a visa now? Will they expire if we are approved too soon? So you can only apply for your visa less than 90 days before your intended departure date. So if you plan on arriving, let's say July 15th, you cannot submit your visa application before April 15th, probably April 17th. When you go to submit your application, you are going to put the start date of the visa application on the visa form. You're the one who determines when your visa starts. It doesn't have to be on the exact day, but it has to be soon. And then you need to work to find a long-term address as quickly as possible so you can validate your visa within that 90-day period. Catherine, when notifying the government within that 3-month time required that you have arrived, what if you don't have a physical address? You need to have a physical address within 90 days. You need to have a long-term lease at an address where you can get mail by the end of the 90 days so that you can do all of the things that you need to do to live in France. What documents are necessary to open a bank account? What bank company is easiest for foreigners? They're typically going to want a copy of your lease or your active vault. They're going to want, sometimes they want bank records from your US bank or bank statement. They want a copy of your passport. They want proof of where you reside. If you have a work contract or you're registering a business, they want that. It really depends on the bank. They can ask for a bunch of different things. You're going to have a much easier time to open an account if you own property or you have some type of economic tie to France. You need to have a fixed address. Deborah, I wanted to ask about exchanging American dollars to euros. Is that something I can do ahead of time? Yeah, so you want to do it ahead of time and you want to work with a currency transfer service that enables you to sort of play the exchange rate a little bit. The rate is really good right now, dollars to euros. I'm going to put in the chat for you guys the referral form. So if you would like a referral to our currency people, etc., we can send those out to you. But basically, there's a couple different ways that you can do the currency exchange. I do not recommend using something like Wise for large amounts. Wise is fine for small amounts up to a couple thousand euros, but it's basically AI. And I'm not even sure right now that Wise is opening new accounts for Americans who are in the US, but if you're transferring more than modest amounts, you want to have an actual human person so that your money doesn't get lost in the internet. Or if it does get lost in the internet, your human contact can find it. You do not want to be transferring house buying money with Wise. But basically, the way these services work is if you have an account with them, you can see what their exchange rates are in real time. They are all really competitive with each other. Who is giving you the best rate is going to change on an hour by hour basis. And then you can do it a couple of ways. You can lock in an exchange rate now and then pay in the money later. So if the rate is really good today, you can say, okay, I'm going to buy 250,000 euros at today's rate, but I'm going to give you the money in 6 months after I sell my house. That's totally fine. Another way to do it is like, okay, I have the money now, but I don't want to buy until the exchange rate hits X. So it's more like playing the stock market. So you're going to want to talk to them, see what the best situation for you is, and then take it from there. In general, what can you tell us about which services we should look for in a bank? We've made up a list. So you're going to want to look for just a regular personal account. You're going to want potentially a livret A. That's like a French savings account. It's capped at about 20 to 23,000 euros, but it has a slightly better interest rate than just keeping it in cash. Many banks will also provide insurance. So homeowners insurance, car insurance, rental insurance, things like that. Can you suggest 2 reliable and easy to deal with banks in Normandy or Pays de la Loire? I cannot recommend regional banks. I don't know every bank everywhere. And reliable and easy to deal with are not words that I associate with French banks. You're going to need to have a visa and a tie to France to be able to open one. So let me know when that happens, and I can make an introduction at that time. Jacqueline, if we want to move in November 2026, when should we hire your company? Would that initial phone call be a good to schedule in June, July of 2026? Okay, so if you're looking for a visitor or a family relocation, 3-4-ish months in advance is probably fine. So yeah, initial call June to July, you have 90 days to apply the call consultation fee as a credit to whatever package you sign up with. So if you do a call even May, June, July, and then sign up over the summer, you would get to apply that fee as a credit. If you're looking to be self-employed or get a talent passport, then you want a much longer lead time. For arrival in November 2026, I would say that you would want to start at the latest by April, May, if it's profession libéral, and probably February, March if it's a talent passport. Just for those of you who are considering moving this year, you probably want to start now. The talent passport, you want to be here. If we get on top of things, we can get you here by September if there are no delays for passport talent. I would say we can get you here by July-ish, starting now, for profession libéral. And then for a visitor, it's a much shorter lead time. I understand the documents for the rental dossier need to be in French. Can those documents be translated by a French certified translator before we move, or do you suggest we use a translator in France? For anything that you're getting translated in France or for use in France, you want to use a traducteur assermenté, which needs to be somebody registered with the French court. If you are residing outside of France and you're using, for example, we have a UK translator that we recommend who works with a financial planning and estate planning group in the UK, but it's for people who are in both countries, but mostly residing in the UK. If you're using the documents in France, it needs to be a certified translator registered with the French court. How long it takes, how much it costs, that's really going to depend on when you're asking and how many documents you have. And there are usually flight discounts for having a lot of documents and a bulk translation. There are times of the year that are busier. For example, one of the people that we work with is also an accountant. So if it's in tax season, he's not getting you your documents fast. That being said, I'm going to challenge the idea that you need to get a certified translation of all of your rental dossier documents. I think English is going to be acceptable in many cases, or working with an agency, you could determine exactly what documents to translate, because you don't want to spend €1,000 translating 25 pages of documents for nothing. Sarah, what happens if I am in Paris on a long stay visitor visa and in the middle of the year I get accepted to a PhD program in Paris? I'm an English-speaking UK graduate program in Paris, which doesn't require me to get a student visa with them if I already have a way to stay in France legally. Is it okay to be on a long stay visitor visa? So there are different rules depending on the program and whether or not you want to get a student visa or a passport visa. I would not recommend a student visa, a visitor visa, because then you can't do internships, and it's going to make changing your visa status at the end very difficult. So if you're on a visitor visa and then you get accepted to a PhD program, you need to go back to the UK at the end of your visitor visa and apply for either the student or the chef scientifique visa. Chef scientifique requires that you're affiliated with a French institution and that you have a minimum payment from the institution. A student visa would be if you don't meet certain income requirements. Roughly, how long does it take from finding the house you want to buy to closing the deal and all the paperwork in Paris? If you want to work with a buyer's agent in Paris, I can put you in touch with somebody who can explain the process better than I, and she helps people to find the right property. In terms of timeline, I would expect it to take a couple weeks, maybe a month, to get to the compromis de vente. You want that to go really quickly so that there's a piece of paper with it outlining the deal. If all goes well, it's about 3 months for all of the checks to be done, for all of the due diligence on the part of the notaire. It's about 3 months. If you're doing this and August is in the middle or May is in the middle, May has 3 holiday weekends usually, then add a couple of weeks, because most likely the notaire is going to be on vacation. In some cases, it can be advantageous to use your own notaire, and then in that case, the notaire splits the fee. However, one, that's slightly less incentive for them to do things fast, and two, Then if it's August, you have two people who are on vacation and not just one. It can be slightly to your advantage because even though the notaire is supposed to be neutral and work for both the buyer and the seller or work for the French government, really, in some cases, it can be better to have your own, but then the timeline is extended. What are the closing costs for the foreign buyer? Buyer pays the percentage of the sale price going to the selling agent, anything else. So it really depends. In most cases, the closing costs or the notarial fees are going to be about 8%, but they can be less on new properties. It also depends on whether or not there are agency fees and what the compromis de vente says about how those fees are split. And of course, if you're using a buyer's agent to find a property, then you're the one paying that fee. Or B, how long should those arriving on an auto entrepreneur visa expect to wait until they have access to the French healthcare system? It takes as long as it takes. And it depends how good your documents are. If you have changed your name 4 times, then it's going to take longer. I ask because I'm trying to decide between the value of buying monthly versus a 6-month or annual private insurance to bridge the gap. Yeah. So in looking at insurance policies, the ones that have the option to pay monthly tend to be way more expensive than the ones where you just buy an annual pack, but annual policy. You should know that the insurance is not required as a document for the visa application for the Profession Libérale visa. They don't ask for it as part of your file. So if you don't have it, or if you had a 6-month policy or whatever, it's not a big deal. Technically, you're supposed to be covered until you're into the French healthcare system. That being said, all of the monthly plans that I've seen have been $200, $300, $400 a month, whereas we work with annual policies where they're anywhere from 600 being the absolute cheapest, bottom of the barrel policy that gets you through, all the way up to about 2,800, which is a reasonable policy that's going to cover a little bit more, like not necessarily pre-existing conditions, but like preventative care and things like that until you get on the French system. Great. Have you found that there are any items, be it kitchen, culinary, household, clothing, etc., which you brought with you? Is there anything that you have visitors bring with you from America when they come? For example, I've heard France does not have brown sugar. So anything for cooking or baking you can pretty much find, although I do tend to bring back stuff like baking stuff, like white chocolate Ghirardelli chips or peanut butter chips or interesting colors of Jell-O, things like that. And I like the seasonal candy, and that's become really a lot harder to find. There used to be some stores like the Thanksgiving store, or there was one in Good We Trust that was in the center of Paris. There was My American Market, and they used to all have the seasonal candy and the stuff that you would pay too much for, but like once a year. And unfortunately, the EU has gotten a lot stricter about certain chemicals that are in that kind of food. So even though everybody knows candy corn is not a health food and, you're not eating quantities large enough to get cancer from whatever is in the orange, it's really hard to get that stuff now. So I go back once a year. I go back once a year for a couple of weeks. Actually, this year I'm going to be going back twice. But yeah, things like seasonal candy. Other than that, you can find. Most stuff, if you're really looking for it, you can find. Brown sugar you can get at like organic health food stores. I used to bring back, in the beginning, I used to bring back like deodorant. I don't really bring that stuff back anymore. Robert, can the VLSTS be renewed online? I have one as of February 14th. If it's a visitor visa, yes. If it's a different long stay visa, VLSTS, not necessarily. Some of them are renewed in the prefecture, some of them are not. I'm going to go ahead and put in the chat. And I still have a few more questions, and I'm going to have time to get to the questions in the chat, but I'm going to go ahead and put in our proposal request form. So if you are thinking about working with us and you're going to be getting started in the next month or two, and you would like a proposal from us for helping with your relocation, we can send you a proposal that will tell you everything that our service includes during your first year. Usually we work with people, depending on the visa type, 4 to 8 months before 3 to 8 months before they are departing for France. So again, if it's a visitor visa, it could be more like 3 to 4 months. If it's a passport talent, you want more on that 8-month end. And then typically we're working with people for about 6 months after they arrive with getting all of their admin set up and things like that. And then it just kind of takes as long as it takes for everything to go through and get processed by the various French administrations. So if you would like our support with that process, you can request the you can request a proposal for your visa type using the form that I just put in the chat. And go back to our question. Do I have to file French income taxes if I stay more than 183 days in a year? So the 180-day thing is a myth. It is not whether or not you stay 183 days that determines whether or not you have to file French income taxes. If you are arriving in France to reside and you have a visa that is renewable that you would like to extend, then you are making a claim that you're going to become a French tax resident and you should treat yourself as such. If you're getting onto the French healthcare system, you're expected to spend the majority of your time in France. If you're renewing your visa, you're expected to spend the majority of your time in France. If you have a renewable visa, you need to be filing a French tax declaration. If you're not living in France, then you need to not have a visa, or you need to have a temporary visa that is not renewable. You will use the same tax number as you use to pay your tax foncière on your apartment. However, your first tax declaration is going to have to be done on paper. I'm going to host a French tax. We're going to have a couple of different French tax workshops in the coming months. I'm going to host one with Arrow, the Association of Americans Resident Overseas. I'm going to host one with our accountant, Isaac Bacchushat. He did one last year on the topic of French taxes for Americans living in France. And then what I will do is sometime at the end of April, beginning of May, I will host a French tax workshop where if you have a simple tax situation, you want to come onto the workshop and go through the tax forms together, I will walk you through them. And this is for people that have relatively simple situations, Social Security, interest, dividends, things like that. Not complicated. Like I have a French and a US company and I get child support and I have a trust. Not those kinds of situations, but for people with relatively simple French tax situations, we're going to do a workshop together and I'll give more details on that at the April Q&A, which I believe is Monday, the 7th of April. Patricia, what's the best visa to look into if I want to move to France just because I love my boyfriend? I'll either work there or work my US job remotely, and I'll also be taking a French immersion program. So if you're going to be working in France, then you need a visa that enables you to work. And since you're not married, then that means either a salaried, carte bleue européenne, or passeport talent entrepreneur for starting a company, or profession libérale for having a self-employed status. I would highly suggest reading foolproof French visa to determine the visa type before you go any further. Catherine, approximately how long does it take to get business plan approval from DREET? That is not a thing that is required right now. For a talent passport, business plans need to be approved by the Ministry of the Economy. The theoretical obligation to have a profession libérale approved by DREET is not currently a requirement. If we are in France for 90 days, can you apply for your first visa within France, long-stay self-employment visa, or do we have to come back? No, you need to apply for a visa in a country where you have citizenship or residence. You cannot apply for a visa from France. Sarah, if I want to retire and live 7 months in France and 5 months in the US, what type of visa do I need? So my recommendation for that would be you would want to get a non-renewable temporary visa for the 7 months that you want to be in France, because it doesn't sound like you're going to be spending an overwhelming amount of time to make France your long-term permanent residence. So it doesn't sound to me like a renewable visa would be appropriate in that situation. And I'm not sure that would be enough time to maintain yourself on the French healthcare system, for example. I changed my last name by appending a new last name to my existing 3 names in 1985 in California using common law usage process, not a lawyer. That is going to be a nightmare for getting you on the French healthcare system. We had a client who was married with a Y. She changed it to marry with an I through that exact same principle in California where you could just change your name by writing it differently. And it was a pain in the ass. So get some kind of document. What we would have you do if you were our client would be that we would have a document drafted that we would ask you to get notarized and then translated. But she really only sorted things out because she made a friend at the local town hall and she was in a really small town. So it doesn't matter how many IDs that you have in this name. It matters that the name on your birth certificate does not match the name you have now. And there is no legal documentation to show that you are the same person. So start thinking about how we can fix that now. Now I'm scared about the prestazioni baja being rejected for renewal. How do they assess the line of work from which your income is coming? Um, because you're giving them invoices and you're telling them what you're invoicing for. If you don't have French clients in the first year, is that grounds for rejecting a renewal? Once you are in France and you're invoicing people and you're putting it's a legal requirement to put their name and address on the invoice, they don't really care where the money's coming from as long as you're declaring it and paying taxes on it. I don't think you have to worry too much about whether or not you have French clients during the first year. We always require our clients to get potential French clients when they are applying for these visa types to make sure that they get approved. Sometimes, like the actual French clients that they've planned to work with don't pan out in the first year. And so then they just have their invoices to whatever other people they were working with, and that's fine. Can you use a friend's address? If you mean for proof of address when you are living in France, yes and no. I mean, we often have people say that they're going to be staying with a friend when they first arrive. If it's true, you cannot have a friend fraudulently claim that you're living with them when you're not. There are legal repercussions to your friend saying that you reside with them and giving you proof of address when you're not actually living there. So again, don't lie to the French government. If you're not living in France, you're not living in France. If you aren't living at a person's address, then you need to tell them where you actually are living. Do you have a translator you can recommend for those residing in Canada? I don't have a list of Canadian certified translators. No. I would find out whatever the Association of Certified Translators is for Canada. However, again, I stress that if you are using documents for purposes in France, you want to use a French certified translator who is sworn to the French court. I have two questions, Claude. I have two questions. I've been living in France since April 2023. I have a VLSF. I don't know what that is. Not a VLST. I assume you mean a VLST, which is a temporary visa, and that was a typo, which categorizes me as a visitor. I will soon apply for a VLSTF visitor visa, where I'm asked if I resided more than 3 months in France. Yes. So you need to put that you have been living in France for the past year on that visitor visa type. Will I pay property taxes for the house that I bought in France if I'm considered a visitor, not a resident? So you've been using the house as your primary residence. So that's what you should tell the tax office. If you're asking about the form where you declare the use of your house, you need to say how many days it was occupied and what the purpose is. You've been effectively using it as your primary residence for this past year. I'm American and Belgian living in the US and relocating to France in June, July. Do I need a visa? If you are a Belgian national, you do not need a visa to reside in France. You just need a Belgian ID card or a passport or something. Can you help someone with an application for French citizenship or recommend someone? I don't think that's something that we can do at this time. You're better off looking for a qualified immigration attorney. We don't have any in particular that we recommend because a lot of the things that immigration attorneys do, we do. I mean, they're mostly useful for when there's some kind of contention or you need to sue the French government. So, yeah, there's a lot that I follow on LinkedIn, but I don't have anybody in particular that I recommend. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming to the Q&A. Again, I'm going to give you a link to, we've got foolproof French visas. We've got, if you would like to request a proposal to work with us on your transformation and your relocation to France. And I'm going to go ahead as well and give you the link to book a consultation with me. If you do schedule a consultation and then you sign up to work with us within 3 months, then you can apply the consultation fee to the cost of your package. What else do I want to tell you? We have some upcoming events. I'm going to be in Boston at the French Library on March 18th, and I'm going to be doing an event with Allison Grant of Liberty Atlantic Advisors and Duty of GTE Real Estate, who's based in New York and Paris. That's going to be in New York, down in Soho on Wednesday, March 19th. And then when I get back in April, we're going to have a Q&A. We're going to have a couple of webinars. Oh, I've got an upcoming webinar about PUMA taxes as well. So we're going to talk about PUMA contributions and how those work, which is especially interesting if you have a lot of passive income from the US, the UK, et cetera, and you are potentially going to be liable for that social charge contribution into the healthcare system, which is separate from income taxes. So make sure that you are looking out for information on those events. And I will look forward to seeing you at the next Q&A, which is going to be, yes, Monday, April 7th. Thanks so much for coming, and I will see you then. Have a good night or day.